So, I finally got around to watch Sound of Freedom, ironically in an in-flight entertainment system while flying from Taipei to Vienna. This should tell you one important thing right from the get-go. When all was said and done, the whole controversy around this movie didn't particularly matter because the movie itself was uncontroversial. Because if it had been controversial, then it likely wouldn't have made it into the entertainment system of a top 10 best airliners in the world. As a rule, stuff that is really controversial doesn't make it to 40,000 feet because no airliner wants to risk a scandal with its customers. Not in these days when they're all trying to continue to stay alive after the pandemic project. So, if it's not really that controversial, then what was all the fuss about? Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, I had an idea about what I wanted to say about this picture almost 2 months ago, as the notes in the Freedom Alternative Network internal system can attest, but I also wanted to get to see the movie before talking about it because, well, who knows, maybe the detractors do have a point, even if a small one. The chance was small for that to be true, but still. So, on the movie itself, there isn't really much to talk about. It's just yet another movie about human trafficking. A very serious topic, yes, but hardly a topic that hasn't been put on the big screens before. And just like all the other movies on this topic, they mix reality with fiction, or creative license, if you want. They're not meant to be documentaries, they're meant to be works of art that tell a story, and like any other work of art, it has only loose connections with reality. And just like most other movies on this topic, it is occasionally cringe, and for people like me who actually worked in the field, can be quite annoying. Kind reminder that I was a social worker in the private sector in Eastern Europe. Victims of human trafficking were rare, but definitely not uncommon, and the tendency of activists routinely seeps into not just mainstream discourse, but also works of art. Like, for instance, the movie Lilia Forever, a Swedish film from over 20 years ago on the same topic, depicted the issue of human trafficking much better than Sound of Freedom. However, Lilia Forever was not a box office success, so there's that, nobody remembers it. But even in that film, the portrayal of the pimp is much more naive than how things work in real life. The same holds true for Sound of Freedom, where the mastermind of the operation is portrayed as approaching victims more or less herself and selling them a story. Now, that is not uncommon, but the type of story being sold is chosen to be the most stereotypical of them. Yes, there were situations where child traffickers posed as recruiters for child modeling agencies, but that is not the most common way this goes on in real life. In real life, most child trafficking victims know and trust their traffickers. Still, the negative feedback against Sound of Freedom did not focus on what the film itself got wrong, or on its technique, or even on the story overall. At least not during the period between July, when it was launched, and until November, when I stopped following the controversy because I had more important things to do. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critics' consensus now, at the moment of this recording, is that Sound of Freedom is, quote, an effective and suspenseful call to action against human trafficking, yet not free of issues in its depiction of the sensitive subject matter, end quote. Now that is reasonable. But for most of the last 5 months, a far different tone was used when discussing this picture. The so-called balanced media only addressed the right-wing conspiracy theories around the movie, but very few ventured into addressing the left-wing conspiracy theories around it, such as the claim that the sales are fake, a left-wing cope meant to obscure the fact that, yes, a Mormon religious-based studio in Utah basically hit gold mine with this movie. The movie made so much money that it left those in the industry's establishment straight up perplexed. They didn't see that coming, and, to be perfectly honest, Angel Studios didn't see it either. When the claims about the sales being fake didn't work, the detractors moved on to attack the actors personally, particularly the main actor, Jim Caviezel, who is apparently kinda crazy. And I'm like, okay, so what? 8 days after the launch of Sound of Freedom, there was another Tom Cruise movie that was also launched. Was Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part whatever attacked for being yet another reboot slash prequel slash sequel slash whatever of a very old story that also has crazy actors in it? No, of course not. You see, Tom Cruise's brand of crazy is acceptable because otherwise the Church of Scientology will literally bury you underneath a mountain of lawsuits. But Jim Caviezel's type of crazy can be attacked at virtually no cost because he's unlikely to hit back in kind, even though he should. But those upset with Caviezel are also quite selective when it comes to him. They had no problem, for instance, with his role in Person of Interest, a TV show that I strongly recommend everyone watches. They also had no problem with his role in Sweetwater, a biographical sports film about the first black guy to sign a contract with the NBA, a film that was launched just 3 months before Sound of Freedom. So obviously the controversy around Sound of Freedom was not about Caviezel's beliefs necessarily, nor it was about what the film gets wrong or about the technique. So what was it about? Well, in public, the establishment excuses itself on saying that they are or were concerned about the spread of misinformation. What kind of misinformation? Well, like the adrenochrome conspiracy theory. But there's just one problem. While the whole adrenochrome story is unproven, child trafficking for blood rituals is something that's very real. Never underestimate the depths of human depravity. Well, it's either that or the BBC retroactively turned into a conspiracy-ridden website back in 2011 when it reported on several hundreds of children being rescued after they were trafficked from Africa to the United Kingdom for work, and some of them for partaking in various superstition-ridden rituals that, yes, involve human blood. Now, of course, more often it happens to adults, and the purpose is not some weird ritual, but straight-up sale of human blood or organs. And no, that's not a conspiracy theory, but a real crime whose victims can be people from all walks of life. Now, the existence of such horrors doesn't excuse the craziness in some of the protests and civic activities that Mr. Caviezel may or may not have been involved in. However, the existence of such horrors is enough to call the equal craziness from the other direction out. No, being concerned with human trafficking and making a film about it and even making some money off of your creation, God forbid someone made an honest buck, doing that does not make one a conspiracist, goddammit. And then there are, of course, the far more mundane reasons for which so many got triggered by this movie. Envy, ideological commitment, and good old politics. The envy part is simple. Here's a bunch of weirdos, not part of the correct class, managing to find the money to make a project that yields very good profits. Meanwhile, you are involved in the latest Indiana Jones, or insert whatever Hollywood crap you want here, your product sucks and it flops. Meanwhile, these indie weirdos are racking up the profits. It's simple envy. These people are not accustomed to seeing success outside of their own class and outside of their circles. It's really that simple. Because for most of their lives, success only came through their circles, and once you're banished from those said circles, there is no more success for you. And for many years, this was true in practice. But like many other things in the last 2 decades, the internet kinda changed that, or more specifically, the internet facilitated a change. Now you can crowdfund for your project. The distribution and marketing for Sound of Freedom was paid for by about 7,000 crowd investors, each and every one of them making a good 20% profit off of the whole thing. The success of this triggered a lot of envy among the professional PR and marketing films. How dare they make this thing a success without our blessing? I'm serious, this is how these people think. Now, I should know because I work with a lot of them, though not in art, but in politics, which is really the same thing at this point. Bottom line is that the establishment in this industry has yet to internalize that the world is far bigger than their little clique. Eventually, they will internalize that, but that moment has yet to come, obviously. And then there is the ideological commitment part. You see, Sound of Freedom as a movie runs afoul of several assumptions that have been pushed heavily in the West. And its success is also problematic because it defies some other conceptions held as true by the adherents of the academic and cultural orthodoxy. For instance, the main trafficker in Sound of Freedom is a woman. You see, that's problematic because even though that's one of the elements of the film that is in fact true in the real world, we cannot have that. But seriously, most human trafficking perpetrators globally are women. Not by much, and it depends on the country and region, but overall in line with the general population. In other words, human trafficking is an equal opportunity crime. So Sound of Freedom depicting the ringleader as a woman is in fact accurate, statistically speaking. Then there is the whole part of casting and modeling being connected to sexual abuse and pedophilia. Now, I know there's plenty of weird conspiracies out there on this topic, but the existence of those conspiracies does not change the fact that sexual abuse of children is also a crime of opportunity. And the art environment is one of those that is particularly vulnerable, and I do classify modeling as part of the art or artsy environment. Sue me if you don't like it. And again, this has been true for thousands of years. It's not something that the far right or QAnon or the Republicans came up with in 2020 or whatever, okay? And speaking of sexual abuse in artsy environments, there is a great 2014 documentary about it called An Open Secret, which is available on Amazon, so again, not exactly censored. So I guess where I'm going with this point of ideological commitment is that there is no smoke without fire. And while the existence of conspiracist loonies serve a good purpose of preventing more people from taking a look at this issue, the smearing as a conspiracist of anyone who does take a look has been losing its power, in line with other taboos in society, for better and for worse. The fact that the conspiratorial mind fills in the gaps should not be entirely surprising. See my video from February 2020 called Understanding the Conspiracist Mind. So there's that. And then there's good old partisan politics. The producer of this film, Eduardo Verastegui, is running for president in Mexico. And he runs on eliminating gender ideology from schools, crack down on excessive sexualization of children, and eliminating affirmative action. In other words, he's running on a relatively popular message, and if he wins, he could disrupt a lot of political and financial interests. So demonizing his work before he even gets a chance to qualify to be on the ballot is highly important if you find yourself opposite of his platform. That's why you saw so many inconspicuous, allegedly progressive pieces in Spanish about how Sound of Freedom is racist or that it portrays Latinos badly, even though it doesn't, but I couldn't help from noticing that even the left has quietly abandoned the term Latinx. Anyway, long story short, partisan politics did play a role in how this movie was portrayed in the press, except it wasn't Democrats versus Republicans or progressives versus MAGA people, but it was in fact about another country. Shocking as it may be, the world is slightly bigger than the United States of America, and there's bitter partisan politics in other places as well. Ultimately, Sound of Freedom will remain as a movie that made a lot of money through some unrelated controversies. When our children will look at it 20 years from now, they will not see anything controversial, but just a movie about human trafficking with some mistakes, some good points, some decent dialogue, and some goofs, and that's it. Nothing extraordinary. What I do hope, however, is that the success of Sound of Freedom encourages other indie creators of non-leftist persuasion to try to replicate the model. Because even though it's a movie ultimately made by religious conservatives, the movie itself could hardly be classified as a conservative movie. And that's the key to a successful product in that arena. And this is something that needs to be said repeatedly. In the realm of art, and particularly visual art, you don't get too far with being preachy. The reason woke films flop is the same reason productions like My Son Hunter flopped. Nobody pays money to see a sermon. Sound of Freedom is not a sermon, so in that respect it gets things right. Everything else is fluff and details that nobody will care about in a few months, let alone in 10 or 15 years. Oh, and it would be nice if more studios would start thinking about that. How will our product, our production, be seen in 20 years? That would eliminate most of the crap that is churned out these days. But that's a story for another day. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about Sound of Freedom. A good film. Not extraordinary, not great, but a solid good film with an interesting fictional story loosely based in reality, which is exactly what most people want from this genre. And with that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all soon on the Freedom Alternative.